The rule at Camp Ashford was simple. Every night at lights out, a counselor walks the cabin and calls buddy check. You say your name. Your bunkmate confirms you're there. That's it. 20 seconds every night, so nobody goes missing in the dark. I was 17, working my first summer as a junior counselor. Cabin 6. 8 girls, ages 9 and 10. Sweet kids. Loud in the good way. The check had never once come up wrong. Not in 6 weeks of camp. Not until the last Thursday of the session. I did my walk at 9 p.m. Flashlight. Names down the list. 7 confirmed in 30 seconds. I got to the last bunk top left by the window and called out, Maisie. Silence. Then, from the bunk below her bunkmate, a girl named Dara. A small voice said, She's here. I put the flashlight on the top bunk. It was empty. Sheets neat. Pillow undisturbed. No Maisie. I asked Dara what she meant. She sat up, squinting in the light, and looked at the bunk above her like she was genuinely confused. Then she said, She was just there. She was talking to me. We found Maisie 12 minutes later. She was sitting cross-legged at the end of the dock, alone, shoes off, feet dangling over the black water, staring at the opposite bank. No flashlight. No shoes. The dock was a 10-minute walk through unlit woods from our cabin. When I asked her how she got there, she said she didn't know. She said she'd been in bed. She said one moment she was listening to Dara talk, and the next she was sitting on the dock, and the water was very cold, and she didn't remember walking there at all. We wrote it up as sleepwalking. Notified her parents. Standard protocol. But Dara told me something the next morning before breakfast that I never put in the report. She said that for about 5 minutes before I came in for buddy check, while Maisie's bunk was, apparently, already empty, something above her had been shifting its weight on the mattress springs. She said she could feel the pressure change with each shift, the way you do when someone moves in a bunk above you. She said it felt like someone lying there, turning over, settling. She said she'd looked up twice and seen the mattress dipping. She said it felt very much like someone was there. She said she had no idea it wasn't Maisie. She said there was no reason to think it wasn't Maisie. And then I came in with my flashlight. And the bunk was empty. And whatever had been lying there was gone. There are trails at Camp Kessler that the older counselors don't take groups on anymore. They don't make a big deal of it. They just quietly redirect. New counselors figure it out eventually. I figured it out in my second week. I was leading a morning hike with a group of 12-year-olds. 6 kids, day packs, the lower loop trail marked with yellow blazes on the trees. Dead simple. I'd done it twice already. We were 40 minutes out when one of the kids, a quiet boy named Felix, who mostly kept to himself, stopped walking. He was standing at the fork between the lower loop and a smaller trail heading uphill. The uphill trail had no blaze color I recognized. Just a single hand-painted marker nailed to a pine-white background, black number 7. No other markings. Not on any map I'd been given. Felix was staring up that trail. I called his name twice before he responded. When he turned around, his face was completely flat, not frightened, not curious, just blank. He said, "Someone's calling up there." I listened. Wind in the canopy. A woodpecker somewhere to the left. Nothing else. I got the group moving. Felix came without argument, which was somehow worse than if he'd resisted. That evening, I asked the senior counselor, a woman named Beth who'd worked Camp Kessler for 9 summers, about the trail marker. She went quiet for a moment before she said anything. Then she told me about a summer 8 years back when a junior counselor, first season, had taken a group up that trail because a kid said they wanted to see where it went. She said they came back fine. All 7 of them, on time, seemingly okay. But for the remaining 3 days of the session, 2 of the kids wouldn't sleep. Not insomnia, they'd lie down, close their eyes, but they'd be awake in the exact same position 4 hours later. Same position. Eyes open. Just waiting. And the counselor who led the hike quit on the last day of camp without explanation. Left her car in the lot and got a ride with someone no one recognized. Didn't collect her last paycheck. Didn't return calls. Beth told me nobody had been up Trail 7 since. She told me the number marker had been taken down twice and kept reappearing. She told me they'd stopped taking it down. I told her what Felix had said about someone calling. She nodded, like I'd confirmed something she already suspected. She said, "They hear it before they're old enough to know they shouldn't follow it." She never explained who she meant by they. I didn't ask. I didn't know her name until after. That's the thing that stays with me, that I had a whole conversation with someone whose name I didn't know, and when I found out, I threw up in the staff bathroom and had to sit on the floor for 20 minutes. I was a waterfront counselor at a lake camp in Michigan. Last hour of evening free swim, my job was to walk the dock perimeter and make sure everyone was out of the water by 7:30. Simple. I'd done it all summer without incident. On the second to last night of camp, I was doing my final dock walk when I noticed a girl in the water. Out past the rope line, treading water, maybe 15 feet from the end of the dock. Dark hair, pale shoulders, completely still except for the small movements keeping her afloat. I called to her. Told her she was past the boundary and needed to come in. She looked at me. Even in the low evening light, I could see her face clearly. She said, and I remember this because the phrasing was strange, too formal for a kid, "I'm not ready yet." I told her it wasn't optional, it was time. She kept treading water. I crouched at the end of the dock and asked her name so I could log it. She said, "You know my name." And then, "Everyone here knows my name." I thought she was just being a difficult kid. I told her to come to the dock immediately, or I'd have to call it in. She turned away from me, then just rotated in the water to face the open lake. And I watched her swim out. Slow, unhurried, even strokes, getting smaller. I radioed it in. By the time the senior staff arrived, she was gone from sight. They launched the rowboat immediately. Full sweep of the cove. Took 45 minutes. They found nothing. When they did the cabin count, every counselor, every camper, everyone was accounted for. No missing swimmer. No one had been in the water past the rope line. The sign-out log showed the last camper had left the waterfront at 7:18. The camp director sat with me for an hour afterward. She was kind. She said the light off the water does strange things. She said long seasons produce exhaustion that can blur the edges of perception. Then she asked me to describe the girl. I described her. Dark hair, pale, slight, maybe 12 years old, calm the way kids rarely are when they're defying an adult. The director's expression did something I couldn't fully read. She thanked me. She said goodnight. She stood up to leave, and then stopped at the door. She said, "Don't look her up. I mean that sincerely. Let this one go." I looked her up that night on my phone. Camp Kincaid, 1997. A 12-year-old girl with dark hair. They never recovered her from the lake. They never recovered her. From this lake. From the water I had been watching all summer. From the water she had just swum back into. Everybody knew Camp Ridgebrook had 12 cabins. It said so on the welcome board. It said so on the map they handed out at orientation. 12 cabins, the dining hall, the arts building, the waterfront. Simple. Mapped. Known. I counted 13 the first morning I walked the grounds. I was new. I assumed I'd miscounted. I counted again. 12 occupied cabins on the main loop, and then further back set slightly off the path, half hidden by a row of birches that looked older than everything else on the property. A 13th structure. Same design, same weathered pine siding, same green roof. Just sitting there. I asked the program director about it at dinner. She said it was a storage cabin, decommissioned. She said it had been closed for years. She said it was structurally unsound, and I shouldn't go near it. She said all of this very quickly and then changed the subject. I would have left it alone. Except 3 nights later, at 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a screen door. That specific sound aluminum frame, the spring resistance, the clap of it closing. I knew it wasn't one of my cabins. I knew the direction it came from. I lay there in the dark for a while. Then I got up. I didn't go inside. I want to be clear about that. I stood about 10 feet from the birch line and I watched. The cabin was dark. The door was closed. Nothing moved. But the light was on inside. Not overhead light, something lower, warmer, like a lantern or a candle. Moving slightly behind the windows. The kind of movement that comes from a source that's breathing. I went back to my cabin. I told myself mice. I told myself an animal had knocked something over. I told myself the structural issues probably included faulty wiring. I told myself a lot of things very fast. In the morning, I walked close enough to look through one of the side windows. The inside of the cabin was fully set up. Not like a storage space. Like a lived-in bunk room. 8 beds, made up with green wool blankets. A painted name board above the door, the kind every cabin had, with the camper names in block letters. Cubbies with belongings in them. Shoes on the floor. A lantern on the center table, cold, wick recently burned. And dust on every surface. Deep, undisturbed, years-old dust. Except for a narrow path on the floorboards from the door to the table. Clean footprints in the dust. Small, bare feet. Someone had walked to that table and back recently enough that the dust hadn't resettled. I told 2 other counselors. One of them had worked the camp for 4 summers. She listened carefully, didn't say anything for a moment, and then said, "How many sets of footprints?" I said I hadn't counted. She said, "Don't go back and count." She said it the way you say something when you already know the answer, and it isn't a good one. Just don't go back and count. The last night bonfire was a Camp Whitmore tradition. Every session, every summer, going back to when the camp opened in the late 60s. All the campers, all the staff, the big fire ring by the lake, songs and s'mores, and the ceremonial reading of the summer's memory book. Wholesome. Structured. I'd been looking forward to it all season. What I had not been looking forward to was doing a head count at 10 p.m. and coming up 1 over. Not 1 short. 1 over. We had 83 registered campers that session. I counted 84 faces in the firelight. I counted again. 84. I handed my clicker to the counselor next to me and asked her to count. She got 84. I told myself I'd miscounted the roster. I pulled up the list on my phone. 83 names. 83 kids checked in at the start of the session, all accounted for, none transferred out. I started moving around the fire, trying to identify who I didn't recognize. It sounds easy. It was not easy. In firelight, with kids in motion, singing, leaning into each other. It took me 10 minutes to find the face I couldn't place. She was sitting at the far edge of the group, slightly outside the main cluster, near the tree line. Maybe 11 or 12. Brownish hair, plain camp t-shirt. She wasn't singing. She was watching the fire. Completely still, in that specific way that stands out in a crowd of children who are almost never completely still. I crouched down next to her and asked her name. She turned and looked at me. Her face in the firelight was fine. Normal face, normal expression, slightly solemn the way some kids are. She told me her name was Claire. She said her cabin was 7. I checked cabin 7's list on my phone while I was still crouched there. 7 registered campers. No Claire. I looked up from my phone. She was gone. The space at the tree line where she'd been sitting was empty. The kid on her left, a girl I did recognize, was leaning into the gap like it had always been there. Like there'd never been anyone next to her. I walked the full perimeter of the fire. I checked the tree line with my flashlight. I walked 50 feet into the woods and back. No one. Final count, 83. Exactly right. Exactly as it should have been. I never found a Claire in any camp record going back as far as I looked. I don't know what she was watching in that fire. I don't know why she was there. I don't know why she gave me a name and a cabin number, like she'd been prepared for the question. Like she'd been asked before. Like she'd learned, over many summers, exactly what to say when someone finally noticed her. Even the darkest stories leave something behind. Stay with me. There are more stories.